So this is where we're going to do your show, Garry.
Charlie Chaplin on the marquee. That's fantastic. We were brought up on Charlie Chaplin. He called himself a world citizen. Show in Burlington, too.
Thank you. You are about to hear from an everyday man with an extraordinary life story. A story that may well give us a roadmap to a better future. He was an actor, a song and dance man who leapt off the Broadway stage onto the world stage in 1948, taking on cops, border guards, armies, and whole nations, showing us that we don't have to be awed by their props of power and control. We don't have to accept a world ravaged by war and plunging towards environmental disaster. For 65 years, as a citizen of no nation, only the world, Garry Davis made his own props of freedom, demonstrating that we, the people, can tear down the walls of oppression and write our own story. We can build a world that is constructive for all and destructive to none. As Vermont author Abigail Stone put it, Garry Davis opens the doors of our personal jail cells, hands us the rusty old key, and says, "Don't forget to dance on the way out." So now here he is, the man Buckminster Fuller called the New World Man, Mr. Garry Davis.
I'm very appreciative of the fact that you're here as an audience and I'm here to entertain you, so it's like a temple. You know, it's like a cathedral. All actors feel the same way. And what we get from you, we get that attention. We get that electricity. We get that feeling back, and it feeds us. So what do I need this for? Now, how did a guy who just wanted to make people laugh end up considered an alien by every single nation that's dividing up our world today? Okay, let's go back. Dad's a society orchestra leader. His bands have played for 9 presidential balls from Harding to Ford. My mother, boy, she took those keys. She was fantastic. I studied acting at Carnegie Tech, and then from then on, I went to Bucks County Playhouse near Philadelphia. Big-time entertainers like George Kaufman and Harpo Marx and so forth. It was great. I'm having a ball. But my real dream was to star in a Broadway show. I dreamt about that from almost day one. And at 19, I got my big break. Well, break. I got in the chorus. I got in the chorus of Let's Face It, a big show on Broadway at 19 years old. Well, we were in Boston, and I went to the producer. I said, "I'd like to understudy Danny Kaye." He said, "What? You can't. Nobody can do Danny Kaye." I said, "Well, it's just for the rehearsals. You know, the other understudies need somebody to read the role." So he thought, and he said, "Okay." 2 years later, Danny gets laryngitis. So I'm down in the dressing room. Down comes the stage manager, and he says those magic words that every understudy wants to hear. He looks down at me and he says, "You're on." First reaction, oh my God, I gotta wash my hair. So, sold out matinee. Here I am in front of an audience at the Imperial Theater in New York on Broadway. But they want Danny Kaye. They don't want me. Can I really carry a Broadway show for 2 hours as the star? Well, Here's one of the numbers. Oh, they passed a law. Oh, they passed a law. Oh, they passed a law. Down in Washington, D.C. Chorus behind me. Yes, Lord. Thank you, chorus. Yankee Doodle went to town, and they want young fellows like me in a goldfish bowl, new and shiny. They went eeny, meeny, miny, and cried, hey, young pup, your numb's up.
The mailman get a little bit my sound, give him gown, I got to say. We'll get the gay, I had to the flame, say them don't question it, give him gown, I got to say. We'll get the gay, I had to the flame, say to get that little bit my sound, give him gown, I got to say. We'll get the gay, I had to the flame, say to get that little bit my sound, give him gown, I got to say. We'll get the gay, the mailman get that little bit my sound, give him gown, I got to say. We'll get the gay, I had to the flame, say them don't report to doctor to get that little bit my say. We'll get the gay, I had to the flame, say to get that little bit my sound, give him gown, I got to say.
Danny got 3 curtain calls. I got 13 for that performance. New York Times wrote an article, Columbia screen test afterwards, offers for a next show, etc. I mean, you know, I was made by that one performance. December 7th, 1941. Kaboom.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm speaking to you tonight at a very serious moment in our history. The leaders in Congress are meeting with the President. By tomorrow morning, the members of Congress will be ready for action. In the meantime, we, the people, are already prepared for action. We are the free and unconquerable people of the United States of America.
I'm no longer an actor. I'm a draftee with enemies I never knew I had. I go from the Broadway theater to the European theater and into the 92nd Bomb Group. I wanted to fly, learn how to fly, so I said, well, if I have to go to war, the government's going to teach me to fly. My brother Buddy, he chooses the Navy. While I'm in training, this tin can destroyer is blown to bits at Salerno. That's a shock. It's a shock I hope you never have. A member of your family gets killed in war. What's my reaction? I wanted revenge. I'm furious at the sailors who killed my brother. My brother, my big brother, my mentor, practically, you know, raised me when Dad was on the road. We were young. We were going to write plays, stories, you know. He was a great poet, very talented. We were going to change the world. That was my first reaction, just get these bastards. But something happened. Later, when I'm flying over Germany in a B-17, and we were ordered to bomb Brandenburg. We did, 5 miles up, and then we go home, and then we saw the pictures. And I was horrified at the destruction, humiliated that I'd been part of it. So my revenge just disappeared completely. I turned to shame. What was I doing? These are people I'm killing. Like the showgirls I dated, who happened to be born in a part of our planet called Germany. My brother was killed, and I'm killing brothers and families. Recently, I saw the memorial in Norfolk, my brother's letter. It was on a bronze plaque scattered like papers in the wind. He had been told that he was killing submarines, not men. And yet, it ate away at his soul, too. He wrote, I helped kill some men that had wives, sweethearts, mothers, and children. Well, buddy, we were both ruthless. Why weren't we arrested for killing people? Why weren't the Germans who killed you arrested? Those questions, my dear brother, ate away at me, and they still do. Well, 1946, the war is over. I get another show, 3 to Make Ready with Ray Bolger. Remember the guy? Scarecrow. Wonderful, wonderful actor and a great heart. Now in this show, he plays the GI sad sack. I'm playing the colonel, and then I'm playing the general, and so forth and so on. But off stage, I'm a real sad sack. I mean, my friends used to say, you know, Garry isn't fun anymore. I'm watching newsreels of bombed out Hiroshima, Nagasaki.
Hiroshima, seen from the air after the atomic bomb blast that virtually erased this city of 340,000 people from the earth. As far as the eye can see, stretch scenes of desolation and ruin.
A girl 10 years old who is 400 meters from the epicenter. 4 fingers of her left hand are about to fall off on account of severe burns. This boy of 6 lost his resistance power and developed NOMA. He died 3 days after this photograph was taken.
You know, that nuclear war, Einstein said war, if we don't eliminate war, war's going to eliminate us. So I go on a quest to find out how to beat the most irrational enemy of all, war itself. I ask experts, I go to the libraries, I look for books. No one has a clue. I'm thinking to myself, is war inevitable? Then I read a book, incredible book, called The Anatomy of Peace. And it struck me like lightning that humans already have a system for eliminating war. It's too simple. Come on, Garry, you're kidding. No, inside countries with one government, we don't fight wars. How about civil wars? 2 governments, 2 sovereignties. But if everyone accepts one government, no war. I look around New York and I see, you know, ethnic groups all over the place, the same ones that were at war with each other in other countries. Here they're playing chess in Washington Square. Is it human nature to go to war? Why aren't they at war? Is it suddenly they all love each other? No way. Some even commit crimes against each other. But then somebody calls the cops, and they're hauled before a judge, and there's a trial. Conflicts can be resolved, not by blowing up neighborhoods, but in a court of law. Then I read Tom Paine's The Rights of Man. Tom Paine made that famous statement, "My country is the world." So if the world is our country, this is too simple, really. If the world is our country and we claim it, and we raise our allegiance to that level, to the top level, no more fictional borders. That's the key. And therefore, no more wars. Suddenly, it becomes very clear to me. I didn't get arrested for bombing cities because there's no law against it. The national politicians fool us by talking about international law. But treaties are just deals between sovereign nation states, which can be broken, and are, all through history.
There before his cabinet, President Coolidge signed for the United States a treaty designed to outlaw war.
Because there's no police force to enforce them. In other words, very simply, no world law. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And that, folks, is why we fought World War II. A war between the nations, not between us, the peoples. If we had had world law, we could have eliminated the global lawlessness, the world anarchy that gave rise to Hitler and the Holocaust. And my brother would be alive today.
There never was a war in history easier to prevent by timely action than the one which has just desolated such great areas of the globe. It could have been prevented, in my belief, without the firing of a single shot. Now, when Kansas and Colorado have a quarrel over the water in the Arkansas River, they don't call out the National Guard in each state and go to war over it. They bring a suit in the Supreme Court of the United States and abide by the decision. There isn't a reason in the world why we cannot do that internationally. It'll be just as easy for nations to get along in a republic of the world as it is for us to get along in the Republic of the United States.
When I finally realized that world law is essential for the very survival of humanity, I knew I had to take action. But what? I'm an actor. I never studied law. I never went to law school. What can I do? I think all of you are asking probably that big, big question. Well, anyway, in 1947, we started rehearsing another show, big show, Inside USA with Beatrice Lillie.
Wanted heart won't let me be.
I can't do it. 3 days in rehearsal, I told the producer, Horace, I can't be on the show. He says, you're crazy. You quit our show? He said, why? I said, I have to work for world peace. He said, now I know you're crazy. You can't work for world peace during the day, and we only play at night. I said, no, I gotta give it my full time. I was up there making war, bombing cities. Now, I've got to make amends. I gotta stop the next war. Can you imagine? You see, I was going through my personal hell. I was like a lot of these guys coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, you know. You shoot somebody, you're shooting an image of yourself. It's like, as a psychiatrist say, you got a hole in your soul. Can't get out. The last straw for me was the start of the Berlin crisis. I'm in the active reserves. What if I'm called to active duty to bomb Moscow now? Wow. I had to do something. So now, here it goes. I head to Paris, I march into the U.S. Embassy, and I officially give up my exclusive national citizenship. Now you say, this is crazy. I made a statement, though. I made a statement which said, now I'm taking the little bit of sovereignty that I possess, and I say, now I'm placing it up on the top grade, on the top level, okay? And nobody can deny me that, because I'm outside the states anyway. I'm no longer a national citizen, so I can do what I want. I can claim what I want. And that's the day, the same day I did that, I claimed to be a citizen of the world. That now I'm a citizen of the world. The consul said, there is no such thing. I said, there is now. I walk out of the embassy. Now I'm free of the war system, liberated from national boundaries, waltzing above the entire system of nations, energized by a vision of a world with no borders, no boundaries, no fear. A world in which we are one. And you know what? The world is already one. And world citizenship is not a new idea. Charlie Chaplin out there called himself a citizen of the world. Socrates, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, all the great gurus, masters, and sages call themselves citizens of the world. Well, unfortunately, not my own family. My sister Ginny in Philadelphia opens the Republican National Convention singing the Star-Spangled Banner. And my father's playing, he's got the orchestra for it, when they hear about my citizenship. Wow, what a shock. What a contrast in family, yeah? Dad implores me to reconsider, obviously. He writes to the Secretary of State. George Marshall. Please don't allow Garry to renounce his citizenship, but it was too late. It's done. It's a legal act. Now, the first thing the consul says, okay, Mr. Davis, now you've got something that belongs to us. I say, yeah, U.S. passport, thank you very much, give it back. So you take it back. Now you've got no documents. You walk out of that big door on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, and you've re-entered France without documents. This is the lot of millions of people. So what does France do? They say, get out. Get out because you're stateless, you ain't in our book, and if you don't get out, the pokey, go to jail. I said, fine, I'll go to Germany to help rebuild, what I destroyed. But I can't get a visa to Germany without a passport, the same thing. In fact, as a stateless person, no nation will admit me. So where's a world citizen to go? Where? Up to the moon? Out into the ocean? There's no other place. So in that moment, something very interesting happens. France declares the Palais de Chaillot to be international territory for 3 months, for the United Nations to hold its General Assembly there. That was the only year that the UN was out of New York. They had nowhere to go because the building was not built on the East River, so they said, let's go to Paris. So I said, my God, here's a piece of world territory right in the middle of Paris. Beautiful, makes my point. So I go to the press the night before, September 10th, make a statement, give it to the AP, the wire services, Reuters, and so forth and so on. Take my pack on my back, go to the Place Trocadero. On midnight, I leave France by going to the territory of the Palais de Chaillot. And I unroll my sleeping bag and go to sleep. Hey, lovely. I'm out of France. Next morning, about 6 a.m., nudge, nudge, nudge. Monsieur, you cannot stay here. It's against the law. And I wake up and out there is against the law for me. I show this gendarme what they call a refus de séjour. They're refusing to let me stay. He looks at it and says, but you must be out of France by September 11th. I said, that's right. And I'm out of France. Did you know that France ceded this territory to the United Nations? He said, no, but you're in Paris. I said, yeah, Paris, but it's not French anymore. It's not France. And I said, if you take me away, if you bring me back to France, you'll be importing an alien, and you can get arrested for that. He really backs off. He needs some orders now. And then the press arrived, and it became a circus.
Here's Garry Davis, the ex-bomber pilot who has claimed sanctuary at the UNO headquarters in Paris.
And that made a clamor all over the world, because Europe was still in ruins, and people were so fed up with war. And then I said, well, now that I've got the attention of the United Nations, I'm claiming to be their first citizen. The only guy that they could get to, the press, was the Soviet Undersecretary General. And his statement was very interesting. Davis is a world baby. States may join, but diapered citizens niet. Anyway, the story went out. Crowds started to gather around me. I had students, I had housewives, I had businessmen.
I remember Garry very well. He was ex-soldier, an American, and he wanted to try to impose the new idea of citizen of the world. And we were, Marchand and I, very, very interested by that. And we stayed with him. We became friends.
People wanted peace, and this seemed to be a breakthrough for them. They didn't know why, but at least one guy had broken through and was talking to the UN directly, and they couldn't get rid of him. It was a modern David and Goliath, kind of one man against the Goliath. I held the ground there in this hectic time for 6 days and nights. On the 6th day, a bunch of postal clerks came out of the the Palais with sacks on their back and dumped the mail at my feet. And they were from everywhere in the world. From Australia, from India, from Sri Lanka, from all over Africa, all over Europe and so forth. It was amazing. Talk about one world. And what are they saying? They're saying, you know, we're weary of talk. They're saying, we want peace. You are our hope. We are with you in our little village. Continue, how can I sign up as a world citizen? A lot of us said, you know, you're like us. If you can be a world citizen, so can I. So 9/10 of those letters say, we want to be world citizens like you. It was the beginning of a movement. On the 7th day, the UN was fed up. All the politicos all over the place were fed up. This guy, you know, giving us a bad rep. So they invade the French Minister of Interior to get this guy off their doorstep. So at 6 a.m. in the morning, the tent is flying over my head. I've got people around, 100 people saying, Garry, get out, get out. And the gendarmes, 100 gendarmes with their patrol wagons were there. And boy, they got everything out, and me in the patrol wagon, and brought me back into France. Illegally. They should have been arrested. Well, okay, that was the first act. What happened was a very well-known French war hero, Colonel Robert Sarrazac, he organized 24 leading writers to form what they call a Conseil de Solidarité.
Very famous writers, such as Jean-Paul Sartre, and Albert Camus, André Breton, Simone de Beauvoir, and Raymond Queneau, and many others came with us. And little by little, we created a real movement.
Well, so many wanted to be world citizens. What we did is we opened a registry. The little hotel I stayed in, which is called, ironically, the Hotel des États-Unis, Hotel of the United States, but we took over the whole hotel. The first floor was reception, the second floor was registration, the third floor was media, the fourth floor was Peuple du Monde, which was our newspaper, and the fifth floor was me. Now, in 2 years, we had registered 750,000 people from all over the world. Hey, this is more people than a lot of smaller nations, right? So this was the beginning of a new constituency of citizenry on a global level, something extraordinarily historic and extraordinarily important. Now, since the UN Charter mentions human rights 8 times, they had to define them. So they appointed Eleanor Roosevelt, who was the U.S. delegate to the United Nations, as the chairperson of this Human Rights Committee. But the Soviet bloc said, human rights, no, it's an invasion of our sovereignty. We agree with economic rights, but not human rights. So Eleanor Roosevelt had meetings after meetings after meetings, and my council decided we have to plot a very great big act of political theater.
One day, I remember that very well, in front of that theater with Breton, Camus, many others, and I decided to play a little comedy. And we arrived in the theater, where maybe 20, 25 friends, and it was, I remember very well, during the Soviet representative who delivered a speech.
But the Cold War is right there in that room, nations squabbling like little kids back and forth.
The chair rules the remarks just heard entirely out of order.
So what I did was I got up before anybody could stop me. There were balcony railings there. I leaped over the balcony railings out to the front where everybody could see me, and I shouted,
I interrupt to make a
I interrupt in the name of the people not represented here.
À l'Assemblée générale de l'ONU, Garry Davis, le citoyen du monde qui fit déjà parler de lui au début de la session, en s'installant sur les terrasses du palais de Chaillot.
And Herbert Evatt, he looks up, he sees me. It goes like that. Somebody from the people had the floor given by the President of the United Nations. Well, I started. The nations you represent divide us. and lead us to the abyss of total war. What we need is one government for one world. And if you won't do it, step aside. And a People's World Assembly will arise from our own ranks to do it, because we can be served by nothing less. Well, I was hustled out, and opposite Sarazak is giving the speech, the same speech, but in French.
Soudaine du délégué soviétique, M. Wyszynski, et les remous provoqués dans l'assistance par cette intervention inattendue.
And then we took over. We had so many people wanting to speak in that balcony, you know, that we interrupted that session for a full hour.
Three of us, we were catch. We spent the night in a small, not real jail, but it's kind of jail in the United Nations. And now when I'm thinking of that, I think it's very amusing to spend the night with the future Nobel Prize, Albert Camus.
That went all over the world.
At a recent sitting of the United Nations General Assembly, there was an astonishing outburst from Mr. Garry Davies, known as World Citizen #1.
I pass the word to the people.
My father, it's funny, he told me he was driving down Broadway in his chauffeur limousine, and he sees at the Translux Theater, and there's a sign below the Translux Theater, Garry heckles UN. He says, stop the car. So that shows you how far this went. This went all over the world. Well, we knew we had to go even bigger. We had to plan a big, big, spectacular show to break the logjam. When that vote came up in the General Assembly, we rented the biggest hall in Paris. It's called the Vélodrome d'Hiver. Vélodrome d'Hiver is the Madison Square Garden of Paris. And we rented it on the 3rd of December to hold the meeting on the 9th of December, an impossible task to fill that hall in 5 days. And they put me in a little room, and I was doing my speech, trying to learn it, and the other speakers went up to the platform. Now, when I went on, I was brought up to this huge amphitheater, and I was absolutely stunned by the number of people there. It was 20,000 people. Life magazine did a big spread on this. Then a chant started, slowly building. Garry Davies, Garry. I mean, I'm used to applause, but this was a shockwave of sound. And you know, my eyes get wide, and you know, my hands rise in the air like this, clenched. I was taken in. You know, I was taken in by this incredible thrust of power. You know, I began to lose myself, this kind of mass reaction. But mass power is like a drug. For a brief moment, I really gave in to the crowds of adoration. Then, you know, you draw back, fearful of what the very thing we're rebelling against, giving power to one person, is happening. So, you know, I was, you know, terrified. And then speaker after speaker, and everybody was restive. Everybody wanted to hear what the president of the United Nations said about making peace. Well, finally it came. And here's one of the things he said. He said, as for me, I would be in full agreement with the ultimate goal of world federation and of world citizenship. Dr. Evatt, nice guy, brilliant guy. The hall erupts in cheers. Then the letter continues. The United Nations organization has not received the general power or the prerogative to make peace. Indeed, the charter itself stipulated that the great powers would make peace, and in the primary function of the United Nations would be to maintain international peace once this has been made. To the public, this was sheer gobbledygook. Who the hell can make peace then if the United Nations can't make peace and admits it? Who is to make peace? The nations can't make peace, they make war. Well, finally the crowd reacts in a fury. Well, a young guy, his eyes really wild, you know, hair streaming. He pushes through our security, jumps onto the speaker's platform, and he appeals to me. We are tired of mere words. You're a man of action. Lead us. We will follow you. Tell us what to do. Young people, and everybody, hey, applause. Hey, I didn't know how to answer that. You know, he was doing what I did at the United Nations. But anyway, I pulled my thoughts together and I began to read my speech. And it was totally inadequate. Totally inadequate. The microphones pick up my words, hurls them out full-blown, you know, from enormous speakers. And I realized we are doing the very same thing I argued against. You understand that? We blather about the horrors of World War and the rights of man, but what does it all mean if it's not followed by deeds? You know, it's all blah, blah, blah. Well, I finish, but boy, I feel totally drained. I return to my little room at the hotel, des États-Unis, you know, listening to the little sad tinkling of the piano downstairs, and pull out the flyer with my picture on it that was given to these 20,000 people. Tear it up. Crawl into bed. But if my reaction was negative, the world's press reaction was exactly the opposite. News of the event echoed throughout the world.
Garry Davis, premier citoyen du monde, s'était élevé à la tribune du Vélodrome d'hiver.
And declared himself the first citizen of the world.
Moi, j'ai choisi.
In Paris, followers of the American Garry Davis, who called himself World Citizen #1, have been demonstrating outside the Chamber of Deputies. It was a sit-down demonstration in favor of world citizenship and other abstract ideas.
2,000 Germans push into Technical University in Berlin to appeal for world citizenship. These Germans, whose country has twice in a generation suffered defeat in aggressive wars, are the latest to join the world citizenship movement, started by a young American, Garry Davis.
World citizen clubs began to spring up, young guys like you. Yeah, began to say, hey, I'm going to be a world citizen.
Weltbürger auch in Deutschland. Auf den Registrierstellen herrscht Hochbetrieb. Insbesondere im Deutschen Zentralbüro in Hannover drängen sich Menschen aller Bevölkerungsschichten, Berufe und Altersklassen zur Eintragung. Oberstes Ziel der von Garry Davis, dem Weltbürger Nummer 1, in Paris ins Leben gerufenen Bewegung ist, eine Gemeinschaft friedens- und freiheitsliebender Menschen aller Länder und Erdteile zu schaffen.
Why not? Women saying, wait a minute, we want to be involved too. Student movements broke out all over the place. Now, here it comes. The day after our rally, which was 9th of December, the 10th of December, the vote. The vote on human rights. And you know what it was? It was unanimous because the Soviet bloc abstained. We'll never know why. But the Soviet bloc for 3 years had been saying, we're going to vote no. But the 9th of December, we took over. We, the people, the world citizens of the world, said, wait a minute, we need our human rights. We need law, world law, backing human rights.
So that we reached the stage, gentlemen, in which by an enormous vote and without any direct opposition, this Assembly has adopted this very important declaration.
Eleanor Roosevelt was very, 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 very happy. She was so elated because now the Declaration of Human Rights was proclaimed as universal.
We stand today at the threshold of a great event, both in the life of the United Nations and in the life of mankind.
5 days later, in her newspaper column, she mentions our interruption, and then she explains that the United Nations is not set up to govern, like Evatt said, and only to give nations a forum. And then she writes something which blew my mind. The bombshell. She writes this in her column. How much better it would be if Mr. Davis, you're not going to believe this, would set up his own governmental organization and start then and there a worldwide international government. Who, me? The wife of the President of the United States saying, Garry, we can't do it. Go ahead, do it. I take that to mean that she's not talking really to me. She's talking to every one of you. She's saying each one of you has to do it. Each one of you has the right, the prerogative, and the responsibility to make peace.
Well, we must want our fellow human beings to have rights and freedoms which give them dignity. If we observe these rights for ourselves and for others, I think we will find that it is easier in the world to build peace.
You know, one part of me is really elated by this admission from Eleanor Roosevelt, who has a worldwide reputation, as you well know, and saying, Garry, you want it? Go ahead. Go ahead, do it, for God's sake. We can't do it, we admit it. Isn't that fantastic? But the other part, you know, scared the bejesus out of me. Anyway, to go back to my story. France was threatening to kick me out, to expel me. So what Sarrazak does, this colonel, Marquis, asks for an audience with the president of France. And he grants it the next day. So we go to the Palais Élysée, we walk in, cameras rolling and so forth. But when he said, okay, I will give you my, what they call bienveillance. Mr. Davis will not be expelled because now he's got the aura of my office. Well, you know, I should have been happy, I should have been joyful and so forth, but instead, you know, I felt I'm caught up in some fantastic, noisy, frenetic, desperate circus. You know, it's like a dream where you know you're dreaming, but you can't wake up. You ever have one of those? Until whatever's out there, you know, devours you or whatever. I was in this dream. I said to my crew, I said, look, you guys go ahead. I have to have a timeout. I'm tired, mentally, spiritually. Sarrazak says, but you are the spark, la porte-parole. You carry the word. I say, listen, you guys are the organizers. You're the famous writers, the big intellectuals. I'm weary, I've done my job. You got a great beginning, 750,000 citizens. You know, I'm hanging on here by the skin of my teeth. I need some rest. Sarrazak is extremely disappointed by all this. And then the Korean War breaks out. I think to myself, what if I could have done something different and prevented the 3 million deaths in Korea? All the wars around the world since then, because there's no law to stop them. If I feel guilty about Brandenburg, imagine how much more guilt I feel when I let that awful thought enter my head. So I did take a rest. I decided, since the UN has declared the right to travel, I thought I would resume my efforts to go to Germany to help rebuild. So I hitchhiked to Strasbourg. I approach the Kale Bridge, which is it's on the border, German border. I show the French official my refus de séjour, my orders to leave. He says, eh bien, you may leave. I say, he didn't say good riddance, but so I take one step, and I'm met by a general in his uniform and so forth, and he stops me, and he says, do you have a passport? Do you have a visa to enter Germany? I said, nope, but under Article 13.2 of the Declaration of Human Rights, I have the right to travel to any country. He says, you may go no further. I said, yeah, but I've left France. I just left France. So I turned it back to the consul, the French guy, the immigration. I said, can I get a visa to come back into France? He said, oh, no. I said, well, I'm not in Germany. I'm not in France. I must be on the line between the two countries. You know, I stayed on that line 2 months on the Rhine River. Esther, a pretty young French girl, came over with her mom, who'd been my au pair.
The press contacted my mother because they'd heard that she was his governess in Philadelphia in 1928 or 29. She said, come along. And I came along.
You know, she brought me a tent, she brought me food, she brought me blankets. I was rejected by Germany. I couldn't get back to France. I'm freezing now. It's wintertime. I get sick with pneumonia on that little Rhine River.
So he felt so badly, he was so unwell, that a Swiss journalist walked up and said, my name is Jean Babel, and I'm a journalist, and I've declared myself a world citizen. I think you're great, and you're doing a great job. And I grabbed him and I said, okay, you stay here. And I took Garry and took him to the hospital.
And somehow this incredible girl, Esther, gets the police themselves to take me to a French hospital. And years later, she became my wife. We lived in Strasbourg and we raised 3 kids together. But that's another story. Anyway, back on the borderline, when I got freezing cold, she rallied the Alsatian supporters to build a small little hut.
Everybody was building that cabin. And at one point, the press came and said, what would you call your cabin? And he didn't know. He was a bit taken aback. And there was a little girl, and he asked her, and she said, it's La Cabane du Bonheur, the cabin of happiness. So he said, well, it's a good name. No, this is the cabin of happiness. I mean, for the children, it was a playground. Children were here romping around all the time, playing. And there was a sort of a cot in there, and a table, and a chair, and a stove. And of course, the winter was bitter cold. And I'm afraid the children stacked that stove a bit too strongly, and it went up in a blaze.
That was a sign for me. I give up now. My very cabin, the place I'm living in, burns down. I got to go back to the USA. First, as an immigrant, I'll have to go back as an immigrant.
This voyage to this part of the world community known as the United States of America is more or less a private visit to my family and friends, during which time I hope to assimilate and evaluate my recent world citizenship experiences. I've been asked whether I intend to regain my American citizenship. Since this step I don't consider would change my state as a human being on the planet Earth, meaning simply my state of consciousness as a world citizen and a member of the world community, I see no necessity for it. I intend to remain stateless.
Do you intend to promote your movement in the United States?
My movement, I would say that there is a community of world citizens rather than a movement. When you say movement and when you say my movement, you imply that I'm a leader. Right. I'm neither a leader nor a representative of world citizens. I'm simply one of the world citizens in the community of world citizens.
But because of my stateless status, I'm detained. Over the years, I've been in 34 prisons. 34 prisons in many countries, not because I committed a crime, but simply because, as happens to many people, they have no documents. And what does the government have to do? It has to hold them. What's a refugee camp except holding people who are not committed any crime? There are millions and millions of people like that all over the world. This is one of the horrors of the nation-state system. Finally, I get into another Broadway show. My heart is not in it. Sadly, I give up Broadway. For me, it's the dark night of my soul. Finally, I get a job in a small machine shop in New Jersey. I never worked with my hands except I carpenter a little bit, but I love the job. Harry Jacobson was, a very rough-hewn Viking of a man. Teaches me how to grind metal. And of all things, he also teaches me an ancient wisdom science known as the Brahma Vidya. Harry, this master grinder in the machine shop, was a guru because he studied with an East Indian guru, Nataraja. While I was learning how to grind metal, we had long talks about wisdom itself. It gives you a peace of mind. All the stupid things go out of your mind. Your mind is just almost becomes blank. That sounds bad, but a higher level of rationality or reason or wisdom has now an opening to come in. You get a burst of serenity from the energy from the universe. So what happened? I regained my mission. I regained my mission to take up Eleanor Roosevelt's seemingly preposterous suggestion that I start a government. Wow, but how? Well, I went to see a top constitutional lawyer. This is interesting. He says, Garry, take a look at the 9th Amendment. All rights not specifically enumerated are reserved to the people. Did you know that? Here's a quote from that historic Declaration of Independence. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. Sounds astounding, to institute new government. The people institute new government. But do you want to know a great thing about all this? At the global level, as Eleanor Roosevelt happily pointed out, there was no government to alter or abolish, nothing to overthrow, no violence, which is always self-defeating anyway. So there's no nothing out there except a wide open, marvelous opportunity for me to go out and declare it. So, I went up to Maine, near where I was born, and told my dad my plan. He said, people don't go around declaring governments, he said. Craziest nonsense I ever heard of. And in Maine, too. Why, they'll laugh you off the platform, that is, if anybody shows up. Well, people did show up. Not many, less than 100. A far cry from the thousands at, in Paris, but it didn't matter. Why? Because my audience wasn't local. It was global. It was you and your grandchildren. So, on September 4th, 1953, I declare at the City Hall of Ellsworth, Maine, a government of, by, and for the people of the world. You say this is crazy, but I did it. So then I went down to set up the administrative agency of the government, which is now called the World Service Authority. And it's in Washington, 5 Thomas Circle. It's functioning right now. This is the international exit visa. Yeah. This is based upon Article 13, Section 2 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This doesn't mean that all governments are going to recognize this. This gives us a tool to claim our right. This is a bureaucratic tool because what is stopping us from leaving is their bureaucratic tool. In other words, the visa of control. Yes. So we say, okay, now we have our tool, we're neutralizing your tool, and we're claiming the right to leave. You see? This is the beginning of a whole new development in human rights.
We have been dying in this house from hunger, from diseases, from getting no shelter.
C'est une organisation religieuse. It was a religious organization qui est défendue dans notre pays, which is forbidden in our country.
So we are asking for help. That's why we are applying for your passport.
My first passport was a little 16-page booklet, number 00001. Well, I was first in line. And I entered India with it, and I met the Prime Minister, Pandit Nehru. And I'm in his office, and I tell him, I am in this country on a world passport. I'm a world citizen. Oh, how jolly, how jolly. And I said, yeah, and I know you've been in prison many times by the British, and so have I. I spent 9 weeks in Brixton Prison. Oh, you've been in prison. Oh, how jolly. Now we're buddies. Then I presented him with his own world passport. And then he says, this is the passport Gandhi would have carried. Over the years, the administrative agency of our government has issued over 2 million world documents, all mandated by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Our office is flooded with requests. World citizens wanting world registration cards, stateless people wanting world ID cards with their picture on it, couples denied the right to marry, wanting world marriage licenses, refugees in squalid refugee camps desperate to have a travel document so that they can gain back their human identity. A good example are these Ogani refugees. We sent them world passports after they wrote saying they were kicked off of the land of their ancestors because Nigeria turned it over to the big oil companies. We get dozens of letters every day from people desperate for help. I'm a Liberian refugee. The rebels attacked and captured our town. We were beaten, tortured, molested. They killed my parents. I managed to escape secretly and cross into Guinea for sanctuary. He's in real trouble. The Peace Corps guys helped him write this letter. If he's a refugee, then he will get a free passport because he doesn't have any money. I come from Congo, Brazzaville. My father gunned down in front of my eyes and in the eyes of my mother and sister. Me and my brother were taken into training to the military camp. I was lucky to escape, and I also made my way to Italy through traveling on a boat by night. God was on my side. It took us 2 days in the sea before reaching Italy, so a friend of mine gave me the address to write to apply for any one of the passports. I beg you to accept my respect and my thanks that I feel inside very deep to my heart, that someone in the world is really conscious and helps really the ones who need it, and that we're not lonely and powerless to get justice and feel dignity as human beings we are.
There are close to 55 million refugees and stateless persons around the world today. This is the worst refugee crisis in human history. If you live in a place where you have your home, your family, your friends, your language, your culture, you love it. You want to stay there. You're proud of it. But all of a sudden, if some marauding army or militia is coming after you, you got to get out of there. What happens if your country, because of global warming, becomes flooded with water? Who's going to take you in? They don't have time to get a document from the government. They need to flee immediately. And so we issue them the documents as to get them something so that they can across a frontier and show something, because a border official, they won't stamp your hand. They want a piece of paper that they can look at and put a stamp in.
You know who was one of the first persons to use our world documents? My own sister.
I started traveling around Europe with this passport, and every time I got to another country, that's what I would show. And they would say, do you have another passport? And I'd say, no, this is it. And then they would let me in, so I didn't have any trouble.
Many individuals who don't necessarily need the passport for identification like to get the world passport because it represents our one human family, our one Earth. They want to identify, self-identify as world citizens. And a recent example is a rapper and actor named Yasin Bey.
My country is called Earth. This whole thing belongs to everybody that's on it. And if there's anything that I could do with my career, is to hopefully encourage the generations around me and after me to have that worldview.
He was trying to travel out of South Africa to go to a gig in Ethiopia, and he was stopped at the airport because of some officials who didn't understand his document. We immediately sent a legal statement to the government through his attorney explaining the legal validity and recognition by the government of South Africa, including copies of stamps from the government. The most recent one as you can see on our website here, in the last few months. And you can see there's a list of over 180 countries, territories, provinces all around the world. More than 90% of all countries have placed visa entry and exit stamps on the World Passport. When you carry the World Passport, it is possible that your rights could be violated. You could be harassed, you could be detained, even your passport could be confiscated. That's why World Service Authority has a legal advocacy department that will review your report of those violations and demand redress on your behalf.
No, I'm a world citizen, that's all we have. Thank you.
It's your world. You have the right to travel on it. But you have to be clever. You see, you can't just say, hey, this frontier is ridiculous. I saw a bird come into your, country, and are we less than a bird, for God's sake? What is this front? No, you can't do that. Because these people on the frontiers are kind of trapped in stupid rules. So we simply play their document game. I'm on my way. There are 5 checks.
The judges to sign up as world citizens and to be world Supreme Court judges. But you can't do it until we have a citizenry. The citizenry is us.
Thank you. It is marvelous. It's euphoric. It's euphoric to be standing on the top of the Berlin Wall. The wall which separated humans for 40 years. And now people are climbing up on this side and jumping down on this side. It's unreal. You are the personification of human rights. And that's why this is so important. That declaration was made for us. But if you don't know it, how can you claim the rights?
Article 1. Every man, woman, and child on this earth are born free and equal in dignity and rights.
Every person has the right to live. Every person has the right to be free and the right to feel safe wherever he or she may live.
No more torture. No minds and no bodies shall suffer degrading or inhumane punishment or treatment. Everybody has the rights to stand before the law, to speak, and to be heard.
Anyone who has had his or her basic rights violated shall have the right to a fair hearing.
It doesn't matter what we believe in. It doesn't matter who we are. All of us are equal before the law.
We have the right to expect social and international order. This is the bedrock of belief that the Declaration of Human Rights is built on.
None of the missiles, none of the F-16s, none of the nuclear weapons. The biggest nation in the world could do nothing. The very government which is in power is helpless, is impotent to protect me. It's because the world community is lawless that we have something called terrorism. Lawlessness breeds terrorism, and terrorism thrives on lawlessness. But you can't fight lawlessness with lawlessness. You can't go to war against war. We have to get over this we and they type thinking. We Americans and they Palestinians, and we Jews and they Christians, and we Indians and they Pakistanis. That's all finished. And that's what this means today. That's what I think when I look at this. And now we have to come and create the conditions which allow us and the rest of the people of the world to have peace. Patriotism, yes, patriotism, fine, but a world patriotism. The world's got to be protected. The world's at stake. See, these people were murdered. If there was a law against killing people, which there is on every level except the global, then it's a crime. Then you go to court. Everyone has the right everywhere to recognition as a person before the law. That implies world law. Mind-boggling. With world law, we can outlaw war. With world law, we can outlaw the ravaging of our environment and harness corporate power to serve humanity. Now, does world government scare you? That's the question everybody wants to know. Oh, well, it does me. If it's the same old forces of power, you know, and money, controlling our lives from behind closed doors, the top-down theory, the New World Order, you've all heard about that. But what if we run it? What if we find out how to do that? That law that I've been talking about, world law, isn't beyond you, it is you. We are world law now. If you take a piece of paper, you say, we agree to, you know that's a legal document. You can take that into any court in the world. We're already experimenting in making world law, one community at a time. In view of the fact that the town of Burlington declared itself a world city, and in view of that, that the city of Burlington joined over 1,000 cities throughout the world, that we, standing here on global soil, declare this park as world territory.
Would you say that we are now at a point, seeing that we have the World Wide Web and that the whole world is interconnected virtually, where we can stop with countries sectionalizing our planet and just become one united planet under one banner?
That's the name of the game here.
I can't believe you're here. Bless you, bless you. Come on in.
Robert remembered Garry, and he thanked Garry for bringing him into this idea that we could become global citizens.
Robert was one of the great exponents of this idea. He gave his life to it. I think that people are now realizing that it is one world, we're one family, one human family. And either we're going to live in peace as a family, or that's it.
And I understand that the last trip that Robert took, you and he went back to that spot. Tell us about that.
We sat there. Well, we were there because of the fact that we knew that Garry Davis had slept there.
So we went to the very spot where Garry had the courage to live on the line between these two countries that had fought that awful, awful war. And we allowed ourselves to experience the joy of no guards, no kiosks, of no borders. Now it's a free, open bridge. Strasbourg, where Garry took his stand, became the seat of the European Parliament. And I'm absolutely positive that Garry inspired the European Union founders. And the European Union succeeded in stopping wars between its members. What Garry said worked. Law stopped war, but it didn't go global. There's no world law against war, so wars still rage. And as you see the floods of refugees coming in and these little children being led off the boat, this is a very sad time. You know, the solution isn't to go backwards and to build more walls. It's as Garry said, think outside the box to invent new solutions.
Here in Vermont, we have town hall meetings. Today, with the internet, we can all meet in the same room, the global room. We don't have to give our power away to representatives who become magnets for special interest money. We don't have to be imprisoned by the inventions of the 1700s. We don't need a middleman. What if we invent a governing system in which each of us can participate? Not mob rule, but true collaboration. What if we invent world money? Why not? We humans are an incredibly ingenious species. Why squander our genius on inventing smart bombs to do ourselves in? Why not use our great ingenuity to invent SmartGov, a way we can all interactively and intelligently and heartfully govern our communities, our regions, and our world. Visionary, you bet, but doesn't every advance start with imagination? When we catch the vision of a people-powered planet, then, in this era of instant communication, we'll be able to evolve the tools and the platforms we need to bring the highest and best wisdom of each individual to the task of governing planet Earth. Once we tap into the sovereignty of the whole, we can unleash the genius of humanity. End war, end oppression, solve global warming.
Global warming is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, and change of weather that we've been having, the weather patterns, the flooding, hurricanes. Obviously, human beings have had a devastating impact on our planet. It seems now more so than ever we're at a real tipping point.
I'd like to ask Leo particularly, there's an old movie cliche, you know, the planet is in peril, and it's the 11th hour, and things look really dark, and at the last minute our hero swoops in and saves the day, saves the world. Who's the hero who's going to save us?
I think there's got to be millions of heroes. That's my answer to that. This is a gigantic worldwide movement that needs to cross cultural boundaries, religious boundaries. It needs to unify all of us. And I think how can you argue with wanting cleaner air, cleaner water? You know, these are fundamental human rights issues at the end of the day, and that's why it is such a universal issue and a movement that we all, you know, should be a part of. Everything has to come from the will of the people.
So, it requires you to ID yourself as a world citizen. You don't have to give up your local citizenship. You don't have to give up your national citizenship. You just have to add the top layer. When each one of you does it tonight, in this group here, this small group, you're making peace between yourselves. You're saying, I'm peaceful with you, I'm peaceful to you. It's a contract we're making. That can happen overnight. No more war. God, no more war. What a historic sentence that would be. Because it doesn't take a lot of people. It takes people who exercise their sovereignty on that level. I am not a politician, I'm an actor. But to me, hey, we're on stage, all of us. Everybody here is on stage, and the stage is global. Hey, it's our world, folks. And we human beings can do anything we set our minds to. So say it with me. I am a world citizen, and my country is the world.
I am a world citizen, and my country is the world.
Yes. Let me give you this world passport. That could be something you'd be interested in knowing about. Thank you.
In view of your work as a world citizen, it gives me great pleasure to present you with your world passport.
Oh, wonderful. Where shall I go?
Anywhere you want.
This is phenomenal because I've always loved the concept of the United Federation of Planets and United Earth.
I mean, this moment is very historical to me. And I'm hoping that people who understand the value of an idea and the action behind it to make it a reality will someday want to say, Garry, I want to be part of that dream. And then our children and grandchildren can say, I'm okay today because Garry Davis lived and Garry Davis kept his dream.
The world passport.
Yes.
Wow. What is it? Is it different from an old passport?
Earth passport, no borders. Pasaporte sa mundo, walang hangganan. Vuelvas keine Grenzen. World passport, no borders. Envision in your mind an open door to all the world, one planet, one people. to a place where there's peace in the human race, where everyone is treated the same, regardless of their name, where the arts flourish here, where there's no such thing as fear. The people dance, the people sing, let freedom reign.
I am a world citizen and my country is the world.
Notre pays est le monde.
I'm a world citizen. My country is the world.
I'm a world citizen.
Et le monde est notre pays.
I'm a world citizen.
And my country is the whole world.
Aloha, we're world citizens. Y mi país es el mundo.
Ich bin ein Weltbürger. Mein Land ist die Welt. Ja!
I remember my youth very well. I think the Garry's project and Garry's idea are more chance today. I continue to hope and sometimes to dream, because the dream it's a large part of a human being, and we have to dream because it's the only way to catch the reality is to dream.
Earth passport, no border, pasaporte del mundo sin frontera.
World passport, no border.
Passeport mondial, pas de frontières.
Like those heroic souls who have gone before us, Garry reminds us that one heart with courage is a majority. When each one of us finds that courage in our own hearts, humanity will discover fire for the second time, and the light from that fire can illuminate our path to that place where the heart is without fear, where the head is held high, where the world has not been broken up into fragments, and where knowledge sets us free. A world in which all of us can truly say, the world is my country.
All of my life I prayed somebody'd find a way to end our war. Then one day I met Garry, said he made my mind sore.
I'm going to show you something else. You see this passport? You know what was issued to? Hilda E. Davis, my mother. Voilà. Et tu vois? Ça, c'est ton arrière-grand-mère. Hein? Elle était dans tous ces pays-là, Angleterre, l'Allemagne, et ça, c'est le département de justice ici, tu vois?
Pourquoi il y a ça?
Ça, c'est le signe. On fait un tampon pour voir que c'est légal. You know who, in the end, finally got a world document? My dad. Quand tu étais né en Haïti, tu étais né dans ce monde-là. C'est très, très belle, notre petite planète. Tous les êtres humains sont là. Il n'y a plus de frontières, il n'y a plus de nations. Le sourire du monde.
world citizen. Same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, you know we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.
In this world, we live as one. I know we can make it 'cause the time has come. In this world, gotta live as one. We going in the same direction, a real connection. Out of many, we are one. I know we can make it 'cause the time has come. In this world, gotta live as one. We going in the same direction, a real connection. Out of many, we are one. We are world citizen, and my vision is to let go of our prejudice. World member, don't surrender, never give up on your agenda.
People rise and let them hear you, and show everyone what we can do. My people stand and rise, let differences unite.
In this world, we live as one. I know we can change it 'cause the time has come. In this world, gotta live as one. The same direction, a real connection. Out of many, we are one. In this world, we live as one. I know we can change it 'cause the time has come. In this world, gotta live as one. The same direction, a real connection. Out of many, we are one. World, citizen world, citizen world, citizen.